I am C.J. Obasi, director of Ojuju, co-director of Juju Stories and Mami Wata, and you are listening to the Art or Trash Cinema Podcast.
I spit on your grave. Groovy.
You just take care of the justice, and I'll handle the revenge myself.
Who will win, the living or the living dead?
I had a mad impulse to throw you down on the lunar surface and commit interstellar perversion.
Her deadliest weapon is her body.
We'll tear your soul apart.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Art or Trash Cinema Podcast. You're here with CJ Obasi, director of Ojuju, O-Town, Juju Stories, and now also Mami Wata. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Very much appreciated. So, as we said, we have some questions regarding Mami Wata first, specifically. As we said, my colleague has seen it. I have the pleasure to see it this afternoon, and we will then move on to some general questions regarding your career. So, firstly, your new film, Mami Wata, is beautiful in black and white. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on how this choice has come about?
Yeah, the choice kind of chose me, as corny as that sounds. That's really how I received the film. I'd never saw the film. Even the first vision I had of the film was in black and white. So I've never been able to see the film in color. Even when, through the development, you have so many people you talk to and people telling you that, trying to convince you to shoot it in color. I think all of these things made me realize that is the perfect aesthetic or the perfect look for the film. But obviously through the years as I developed the film further, the script further, I began to realize that the choice for black and white wasn't just because I thought it was cool, which it is.
Of course.
But it had something to do with, there was a sentimental reason behind it, which had a lot to do with my childhood. How I grew up watching films on our black and white TV, and how that particular, sense of attachment to cinema is linked to my childhood and how it made me feel coming back home to watch films on there. So I think to a large extent with Mami Wata, it's actually my third solo feature. But in a lot of ways, it felt like my first feature. So it did feel like going backwards into time to try and reconnect with the thing I love most about cinema.
It's a bit of a nostalgic feeling.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it looks cool.
It does. It does for sure. So the figure of Mami Wata being basically the central concept of your new film, could you maybe explain the meaning of Mami Wata for Nigeria as well as maybe even more importantly for yourself?
Yeah, Mami Wata, across, first of all, there's, the meaning across West Africa, which is why we have what you might call an international title of the film, which is Mami Wata, a West African folklore. The reason for that is that Mami Wata, its origins, even though you find it in, you find the belief system of Mami Wata in South America and in the Caribbean, even across other African countries, like for example Mozambique or even the Congo and so on and so forth. But its origins are rooted in West African belief systems, whether in Nigeria where you have belief systems around Orisha, or in Igbo you have Ordinali. In Benin Republic you have the Vodun elements where Mami Wata is venerated as a deity. So all of these things are rooted in West Africa. But I guess through the advent of religion, Christianity, Islam, the perspective switched at some point, and suddenly Mami Wata was demonized, or is being demonized across the board. I mean, more so in some countries more than others. In Nigeria is more intense because it's a highly religious country. In Benin Republic, for example, it isn't so much that way because it's a country that embraces its tradition and its beliefs more openly than we do in Nigeria, which is why we ended up making the film in Benin, because we really wanted to tap into that energy. So where we were filming in like the real locations where Mami Wata is worshipped. Like if we are filming in a forest, we're filming in a sacred forest. We're filming, a shrine dedicated to Mami Wata is right next to the location. Effigies around us everywhere. So, but yeah, that it is a real religion. It is a real belief system, and also it's very much part of the, I guess, mythology, folklore of the West African people, even though it cuts across other parts of the world.
Very interesting. So you mentioned locations. So the village E is the centerpiece of the film, right? Does this village exist in one form or another? And if not, what was your inspiration?
Yeah, so the village named E doesn't exist.
Okay.
But the type, so there are two things, right? The name itself, E, comes from an Igbo dialect, because I'm Igbo, right? So I wanted a name that connected somehow to the water. So in my dialect, in Igbo, we say Miri or Osimiri for ocean or river. So I didn't want to use that because that specifically connects to the Igbo people. And I didn't want it to just be like, I'm saying this is an Igbo thing, because, it's a West African folklore. But I use the word E because it's a much unknown dialect, and it does mean river or ocean or whatever. But the village of E doesn't exist. Okay. It's completely fictional. But the idea of it, the idea of a village that worships Mami Wata, this exists, across different parts of West Africa. In fact, where we ended up filming the movie is very much similar to E in a lot of ways. Maybe not with the costume or the makeup, but certainly in the belief system. Like I said, we had Mami Wata effigies all around us, everywhere, paintings. It was really that place, and there was a Mamefe in that place, as well. And, that there are a lot of ideas and a lot of specificities in the film you can find in reality. But of course, there's also a lot of, I guess, creative imagination, but it all draws from something, maybe not directly or overtly, but somehow, for example, with the facial markings, that is very much part of a lot of cultures in West Africa, whether the Wolof people or the Igbo people, or, like different parts of West Africa have facial markings and they mean different things. So I took that idea and related it to a village that is still stuck in time, where those things are still very much their way of life. It's in West African culture is used to communicate either a person's status in society or their roles, what they do, things like that. So I use that to sort of like differentiate between for example, the people in Mamefe's house have a particular mark, and Priska, who is like the daughter / protege, has a specific mark. Mamefe herself has. Other people, other older women have. Maybe younger women have. So like if you really break it down, you see that there's a kind of, it's not random. There's a kind of there's a system to the design. And I worked as the production designer of the film, so I kind of like, created a formula. So once the makeup department got that brief, they knew what to do. So we didn't have to like tell, this person is this mark, because they know based on that this is a child, so they get this mark. This is a younger, they get this mark. So so it was really using that, I guess, a real traditional template to create something new.
Very interesting. You also mentioned a couple of characters now, so there is a really interesting range of characters in Mami Wata. Do you have a favorite, or maybe also were there difficulties in creating specific characters?
Yeah, I had a difficulty in creating Priska, because in fact she was the last character I created, funny enough, because I started working on the script in 2016, and between 2016 to 2018 I wrote several drafts, 9 to 10 drafts, and in all of these drafts Zinwe was the major driving force of the story, and Priska didn't exist in any of these drafts, and I always knew there was something missing, so I never liked these drafts, and they were more very traditional, tropey genre. In fact, it was more in the vein of like a traditional revenge genre type of film, which I like. Don't get me wrong, I'm a genre guy, but I wanted to say a lot of other things with this film. The belief system of Mami Wata, it's very much a real thing and a tradition, and I didn't just want to invoke it just for genre's sake. I wanted to, embed codes and meaning to it. So even if it doesn't translate as much as I think a lot of it does, but even if it doesn't, the people who know will appreciate the fact that I put thought into this very real, way of life. So that was that. But in terms of just, I guess, figuring out how to translate all of those things, it took a while. And for me, what unlocked the code was when Priska came into the picture. But it took a while. It took years and years to finally realize that what was missing in the story was balance. Because you had these other archetypes in the story that represented modernity, tradition, extremism, all of that. But we didn't have anything that represented balance or anybody. And so that's how Priska came into the picture. And she had to come from outside of E, in my mind, for it to make sense. Because if it came from E, then why are you different, So I like the idea that balance doesn't have to come in a traditional way,
Interesting. Talking about being a genre guy, we read we read that you grew up watching the horror movies made by Hammer. And we are ourselves massive fans of Hammer films, by the way.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Is there a specific Hammer film that you would say has particularly influenced Mami Wata, or just your career in general?
I would say my career in general, because in regards to Mami Wata, it was so hard finding like direct references. If I found influences, it would be more in terms of how a film made me feel, rather than I like this, so I'm going to do it for Mami Wata. We didn't have that really, in regards to Mami Wata. But my favorite Hammer House will always be the Hammer House of Horror, the show. I mean, it played for the entirety of my childhood, so I have a very fond memory for it, and for some reason my mom used to watch it with me, which is weird. So I have a very sentimental attachment to that. Like, she still makes fun of me for that till today.
Really?
So,
but it's an amazing show.
I mean, it's awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. So in your filmography, the term juju appears repeatedly, and for us it's always something that's hard to grasp. How would you explain this term to a Western European audience, and what does it mean to you personally?
Such an interesting question. Okay, so some people would readily translate juju to mean magic, but it's more than that. It's a lot more than just magic. Magic doesn't quite capture it. So, but I guess to make it easy, you would say magic, right? But the reason why it transcends magic is because within juju you also have like philosophies. Like magic is, I can fly, I can make you disappear. That's in juju as well. But like beyond the acts or the abilities or the gifts or whatever, there is a philosophy, there's a belief system that guides it. So for example, they might tell you, don't do this in the 7th day or in the 5th day, and that's, you're gonna get this. So like, there are all kinds of superstitions, belief systems, philosophies that ground juju, and it's so wide. Like, once you start getting into it, it's such a huge, like, there's no end to it. It's like the abyss, really. So that's why, like, we made a film called Juju Stories, and that it doesn't even scratch the surface. But what we try to do, because I belong to a collective called Story 16, and we're 3 directors, so we made Juju Stories as an anthology film, just as a way to start to kind of tap into the idea of juju and how it relates to the modern world, like the everyday society. So it's no longer the normal lens of African juju. It's really grounded in today's reality, and then I think it becomes more universal in that way. But for me, the idea of juju is something that I want to keep going into. I mean, pretty much all my projects have some element of juju, and even more overtly, I'm going to like do more projects.
That's cool.
That, you know, like I don't know if I can talk about this. Then my agents might get at me for that. But they're like, I have very specific projects that even have juju as the title in it.
Nice.
You know, and I'm really excited about, you know, going further and further and deeper into the world of juju, because it's so huge.
Yeah.
There's no end, really. Like literally, there's no end. Yeah.
I also think it's massively interesting for an audience like us who has no
Absolutely.
understanding of it. It's really interesting.
I don't even have a full understanding of it, which is why.
Which makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So, because with each film, I get better understanding of it, because I could just take like one very tiny element and expand it into this whole thing. So yeah, it's fun. It's really fun.
Cool. We always love the way how you portray Nigeria as a location, more often almost as a character, actually, it feels like, in your films. So what are the positives and negatives of filming in Owerri, in Lagos, or in Nigeria in general?
I guess the positive is that you can pretty much just do whatever you want. You know, there are no rules, like literally. The industry is very open, but the fact that there are no rules, it's also like, it's like a double-edged sword. So there are no rules, but then there are no rules. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, fully understand.
so it's like, I don't know, it's half and half. And then, but for each project, you kind of have to decide what works for or against you. So, which is why we moved with Mami Wata, we had to move it outside Nigeria, because the things that would have been an advantage in the long term became a disadvantage, like when we really thought about it. Like we had rekied extensively across Nigeria, beyond the fact that we couldn't find a place that felt like it was frozen in time, because that's what we were looking for. We're not looking for like just like a rural village. If that was what we were looking for, we could have, you know, found 1,000 places like that, but we were looking for a place that felt frozen, that still had this untouched beauty. In Nigeria, all the nice beach lands or whatever, they've all been like privatized, or like there's a resort there, so it doesn't quite have that innocence. So with going to Benin, where we shot in the mono department, we had, you know, like lush beaches. You could walk for miles and you wouldn't see a soul. So like that's, I think the big disadvantage in that sense would be like with I guess with location, finding the locations that work with, but this is a per project thing, I think. And then, like I said, because of the lack of rules, if you are working within some kind of structure, which you tend to need, especially when the budget increases. Obviously, when we were making my first film, we had no money, so it worked for us that there were no rules. You know, like even though we could have been in deep trouble, because we would go to like the slums and film. You know, like I would never do that now. You know, so but I guess that worked for us at the time, and you know, as you know, you tackle more projects, and I guess the budget gets bigger. You have to figure out what works and what doesn't.
That's a different approach, right?
Yes.
Does your positioning, we understand that you see yourself as outside of the Nollywood system, basically, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Does that make it more difficult?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why I struggled so much especially in the beginning, because as soon as I came out with Ojuju, I gave myself an identifier, and I labeled. I said I wasn't making Nollywood films, and that immediately all the doors shut.
Yeah.
Like literally around me, like everyone just closed the door, and because it was like, who's this guy? Like, who do you think you are? Like, you saying you're better than us, you know that? And it wasn't really about that. It was just, for me, it never made sense that a country with over 220 million people is known for this one thing. It just didn't make countries with way less population. People know that they can offer different kinds of cinema, different kinds of expression. It's not like this in America, even though there's this massive entity called Hollywood. It's not like that in India, even though there's a massive entity called Bollywood. So why does it have to be like that? It just never made any sense to me. And so I wasn't attacking Nollywood. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, I think Nollywood should continue to grow, should continue, and it will. It definitely will. You know, it has the audience, it has everything. It will continue to grow and to expand. I'm proud of Nollywood. But all I was saying was that that's not what I'm doing. You know, and I honestly didn't think it was a controversial statement. But it became that. But over the years, people have learned to accept that that's what I am, and obviously with the international success that has come over the years, even more people are trying to, you know, get on that wave to be like, oh, I'm not Nollywood, you know. But it's like, it wasn't even about that to begin with. It wasn't even about trying to be anti-Nollywood. But at some point we were like, you know what, maybe it's better to draw that line very clearly, which is why we started the collective Sorry 16, and we even created like a manifesto, which, you know, which if you read it, it feels like it's anti-Nollywood. Oh, like cool. If you, we felt that we had to draw the line, so it's very clear. This is what we're doing, and we also found a lot of challenges as soon as we started traveling internationally. Because as soon as you say I'm a Nigerian filmmaker, immediately people have a mindset of what you're doing, and so we had to struggle through that. Even through the development of Mami Wata, it was a struggle. You know, until people started seeing what I've done or what I, you know, then. But it was a lot of fights, which I don't think anybody else, even people from Senegal, don't have to deal with this. If someone from Senegal had come in 2006 to pitch Mami Wata, nobody would doubt, because there's a long history of Senegalese cinema and a kind of art house expectation from that country. You know, even the Ivory Coast or Mali, or, you know, but from Nigeria, there's a mindset of what they expect from Nigeria, and so that I've always had an issue with that, and so I try to fight that as much as possible, and fortunately it's changing. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Same.